Hey, we're doing something special this time, thanks to some of your donations. And the second thanks is actually to the number of people subscribing. I'm trying to get to a place, while my producer is, where we can do something live as kind of a thank you for your subscribing to our little videos format. And so tonight, what I'm trying to do is we're trying to do a sort of a dry run of what this would work like. So I have several people doing cameras, and what they're going to be doing is doing splicing, camera moving, all sorts of stuff right in the middle of the floor here. So, and that's what it would be like if you're going to do a live event. So today, though, as a result of having a question come in from Alastair, and it was a good question, full of stuff, but it was a question about my background and what got me where I am to some degree. He'll tell you more. But so I just said, why don't you just come in and interview me? My producer had been looking for some other format, like an interview format. And so I've invited Alastair, my son-in-law, and by the way, this is nearly Father's Day, so it seems really appropriate to do it. But I've invited him to come in and go ahead and ask his questions in person and actually make it an interview. I want to say before anything else that I don't think of myself, and I'm sure Alastair doesn't think of me as any kind of a god or anything like that. I'm no special person, but I'm hoping that what'll come out of this is how a regular guy, like the guy that I was, can get to where I am, if that's what interests you out there. Sort of the kind of processes that I went through, the struggles and whatever else he can pull out of me. So I'm going to hand this entirely over to Alastair. It's going to be entirely his show. And so enjoy, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot about his background and all that sort of thing. And yeah, with that, Alastair, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. I think we agreed that it would be helpful if you knew who the heck I am. So
I
briefly,
forgot that part, didn't I?
No, well, they know we're related. That's a start. But let me first thank Paul for having the courage to invite me to ask him questions live. It takes trust and courage, so thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. So quickly, a couple notes on me so you know where I'm coming from. I studied with Paul from 2000 to 2005, late 2000 to 2005. And I came to him after 2 years at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I came to him with a desire to flesh out and really actually discover an aspect of painting that I had not found. But I did come to him with a strong work ethic that RISD had introduced me to, and this idea that painting was complex, it was difficult, and it required a conceptual side and an execution side. And so it was really in an attempt to chase the inklings I had at RISD, and to discover what painting and the craftsmanship of painting was really about. That I found Paul Ingbretson at Ingbretson Studios. I have to say that the foundation of my way of seeing and executing paintings ever since was laid at Ingbretson Studios. And after the 4.5 years there, I moved on to Cecil Studios for a brief 2 semesters. So that's my educational history, RISD, Ingbretson Studios, and a little bit of Cecil. Since then, I've been a professional portrait painting, commissions, showing through galleries, teaching. And I think the last time we collaborated was the Tarbell Show in Portsmouth, 2016. So it's a real pleasure to take part in this experiment. I think that covers everything that needs to be said.
Well, except for one thing.
Yeah.
Well, I spent all my time trashing RISD, and you make it sound good. I don't really quite do that, do I?
I played a supporting role.
No, actually,
I'm actually trying to get through this without trashing anyone. It's
very
strange.
good. Yes, yes. I think that fits the spirit here.
Okay. Well, if I'm too generous to someone, then please correct me.
Might be better, given the spirit, if I correct you when you're not. That's my way of being funny, I guess. So we may have to be careful here.
So the spirit of the interview comes from the assumption that many of you are students or have been students and have at some point looked at your teacher and, at least silently to yourself, wondered who the heck they are, where they came from, how they arrived at where they are, how they learned what they know. And you may have found that in order to piece that puzzle together, you may have had to do a bit of detective work. So in many ways, this interview is trying to make that detective work a little easier for you when it comes to Paul. And we're gonna carefully go through the timeline of where Paul started, where he went, and Paul has generously culled a selection of paintings to exemplify 3 different stages of his learning career as a student, and that come right up to his current methods of working. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that sounds
right.
Sounds doable.
So we're doing detective work. In order to do that, we thought it would be good to separate things into 3 categories. We've got the Art Students League, the time Paul spent there studying. We've got Paul's time studying with Gammell. And then we have his work right after that, leading up to the visual order aha moment, or whatever you want to call it, that when Paul got to the way of seeing relationally that he now uses and teaches. So part 1, 2, and 3. And I think it's be helpful to mention that the question I had came about because of a talk Paul did. I think it was number 148, the one on Bunker. And I found it very interesting. I've always loved Bunker. But Paul spent a lot of time in that episode talking about Bunker the Impressionist. There are a few pieces he pointed to and highlighted on the way. But I found myself really interested in what pieces of skill, what steps in knowledge did Bunker pick up that allowed him to so beautifully, so quickly pick up the Impressionist mode and model for working. So that's kind of the backdrop for my question that prompted your invitation. So let us begin. So thanks again.
Hey.
How long did it take you to
Pleasure's
find all
mine.
these paintings?
That's right, and I couldn't find, the most primitive ones, and you could say that would be willfully so true, but one of my very primitive ones is in the back of this thing here, and that's why it's now a different painting.
Oh, it's what we're seeing peeking around the side there?
Yeah, that's what that is. Yeah, you have to use up all your cheap canvas twice and 3 times.
Definitely. I'm still doing that.
Everybody, any student gets that. It's a lot of wood in a mile of canvas. Painting a mile of canvas is a lot of wood and a lot of
money.
canvas.
No one ever talks about how much a mile of
gee.
canvas actually costs.
Yeah.
So the work you have here set up is all work you did in New York at the Art Students League.
Yeah, what you're looking at here is actually, if you count this one behind me, that's 5 pictures.
5.
And it's unfortunately this whole all of these are actually not, they don't cover the really primitive struggles I had when I was doing construction drawing and really what you might call construction painting. And much of what you can see, people who've been to the Art Students League who show videos of how they work, you'll see under, in the first phases of their work what I was doing there.
Before we get into that, though, can you just tell us where you were when you arrived in New York to study at the Art Students League? Why did you even choose? Yeah, well, had you dabbled in any kind of serious art before that? Any training?
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned you were a sculptor up until that point.
Yeah, in my last 2 years of high school, I was able to really dedicate hours and hours per day sculpting. We had bronzes done, all sorts of. It was amazing little circumstances in the Denver area. And so that was where I was, and that was my primary interest. But
what sorts of subjects? Do you mind me asking?
No, figures.
I like this. I can ask anything, and you have to answer.
Yeah, I have to answer.
I have to ask your permission.
This is your show, man.
Yeah.
Till the end. And my primary interest was very tactile. I mean, I felt at my fingertips. I needed to do this stuff in my fingers. Very strange. Because I do tell, the first story I tell about painting is I was a 5-year-old kid looking at the unfinished Washington portrait, the portrait of Washington from the Smithsonian portrait by Stewart. Yeah. And that really is what triggered my entire life of digging up the very nature of this form. But for whatever reason, by the time maybe it was just more accessible, I don't know. By the time I got into this phase in high school, I wasn't hardly looking. I would do drawings. But the one painter that was encouraging drawings was really much more conceptual. So I would I would always, take a figure and cut it in half or something for him to make him happy, and he would laugh at me, and he would say, "You always have to bring the figure in, don't you?" But it was because I had no interest whatever in the abstraction for its own sake. I knew what I loved and what I was aiming at and that sort of thing, and it wasn't going to go away. And then I spent a year after that at before I got drafted, which is another story that has its own bearing on this. But at the Canal Street Studio School of Drawing and Painting.
That's in Colorado?
Yeah, no, that's in New York as well.
New York,
down
okay.
I didn't know. Yeah, down in the Village. And,
so you went there before you attended Art Students League?
Yeah. I spent a semester or maybe some more than that time there.
A note on the sculpture, though, before we go beyond that, because I remember doing some sculpture in your studio, a figure model with the plasticine. Yeah. And as to perhaps why a young Paul Ingbretson would have found that to be sort of the medium of choice, there's something about creating something. You actually have this thing in your hand. It has weight, it has form. There's something almost immediate about it that painting, at least I remember when I was younger, I didn't feel like painting had that immediacy. It didn't have that thingness. You couldn't as readily say, I made this thing with a painting, because it often took, it's flat and it took a lot of time.
And your skill levels were useless. I mean, you look bad.
Thanks.
No, mine. Well, no, I mean, you look way worse at drawing, because drawing is a medium, or painting. That's an interpretational medium, a three-dimensional thing. You can walk around your model, or when you're creating it in your head, you can turn and say, it doesn't look right, and eventually you manage to get to something.
Yeah, I want to return to that, because we hadn't actually talked about this, but I want to return to the role of sculpture in the 3D, because some people I've heard refer to your work as formy. Your painting is formy in the sense that it's very interested in the breadth of form. So I want to let's put that on the back burner as we move on to the work here. But I think that'll come up later if we can remember to revisit it. So you arrive in New York. You've got some sculpture experience under your belt. You've attended the Canal Street for, you said, about a year?
Maybe a semester.
A semester, okay.
It would have been a complete semester if it was a semester, yeah.
So what sorts of, can you give us an idea of what was the studio setup like? What was the setting of some of these paintings?
Of the Art Students League?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, these pictures, actually, all three of these give you a really clear picture of the Art Students League. I think this probably is the top floor, but this thing here, this pillar you see going up, and these cornice, whatever it is, it's a support beam in these studios. And this, I think, was probably in the same area. And so the light coming in would have been, this is New York City. You're up there on four stories, but the 4 stories is nothing. And there's a bank of major buildings all the way across the entire city. So you're getting who knows what kind of light in there. This is daylight. This picture here is artificial light. And that would have been the Daniel Green class. I was the monitor of that class for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And, but these are my regular buddies in this class. And when I got bored, of course, of painting and drawing figures that I didn't happen to like the figure of, or I couldn't get a good angle on, I would just paint something else.
So this is a figure model class going on, a figure painting class, and you're saying, gee, I'm tired of painting just the figure. I'm going to make it more complex.
Well, you can see she looks like a stick over there. It just didn't interest me pictorially.
Right.
And that happens,
Yeah. And so that's natural light, and then this is artificial light.
Artificial light, yeah.
And the small one taped to it.
And that should be the same light, the same class, actually, yeah.
And can you remember at the time what you were thinking and what problems? I know as your student for those years, I know that you were the first instructor I had that saw painting as a series of problems to be solved, and broke down the problem of painting into bite-sized problems that you could address. Can you give us an idea of what problems you saw at the time? Not necessarily ones that you see now, but ones you saw at the time, and how in these paintings you were trying to solve them?
Well, let me give you the sort of the low background. When I arrived there, I knew nothing, and I was of a mind to say, Paul, if you don't do well, if you don't do better than other people coming in at the same dumbness level, if you don't do better, you probably shouldn't be in this field. I mean, that was just me being realistic about it. So I accepted the idea. I knew nothing, and I just was looking for information. And all it meant was I was a student of Brackman, which many of the modern representational painters are, the better ones in New York, the Daniel Greens and others, yeah.
Okay, so right now you ticked off Daniel Green and Brackman.
Right.
And those are two. Did you have them your first year? Were they?
Oh yeah. You get as many teachers as you want, so you load up.
Okay.
I was with Green because of his definite connection and the way he worked to be in the evening class, which Brackman didn't do. So that was my opportunity, and I assume it was also some of those things happened at the league because if you're your first year teacher, you weren't going to get the best times of day, and Brackman was coming down from Connecticut or someplace. Took a train down, had to stay overnight. So so he was going to get his choice of stuff. But I took them because they were both somewhat in the same direction. But the thing is,
And what was that direction? Tell us, as you saw it then.
Well, it would be Impressionism, and you didn't take it anything else except it started with color. And it's one of those things where I could tell you more about that, but that's a better question for later, a discussion for later. But by the way, I see that some of these are they've been sitting in my cellar too long. I'm about to dust them down, but
Adds to their charm.
adds to their charm. Graciously said. You get a point for that one. No, so what happened was I was just sitting there hitting notes, and the Brackman had this one thing. This been the substance of everything I've done ever since. And it was interesting that Gammell said, do you remember me quoting Gammell saying, "You can never get over the influence of your first teacher." And and anybody should remember that, when you're in this world.
So choose your first teacher very wisely.
Wisely, yeah. But Brackman there, and I always show, the cigarette. I want that cigarette you got there. He was puffing away on his cigarette, and he'd be dripping the cigarette. He'd be hitting his lips, and he'd be painting like this, and doing something with his other hand with a rag in it, right? And the cigarette would be dropping down into the palette and the paint and everything else, naturally, all pure romanticism, right?
Adds to the texture of the paint.
And then the cigarette would go up in the air and go, and he would say, "It's just disc to disc. That's all it is, just disc to disc." And that is the summary, actually, of the Impressionist mind and of the truth about all the visual world.
But at the time, you didn't know that. At the time,
no, but that's all I had to hang on to.
Yeah.
So I was hitting color notes and getting disc to disc.
And what did
and dat to dat.
If you can do some time travel and get back to when you actually heard him say that and the cigarette dangling, what did it mean to you then?
Not much. It meant nothing. Except I had a palette which had about 19 or 20 colors on it.
Oh gosh.
Oh no! No end to the number of cadmiums you can buy.
Wow.
There were 3 or 4 mud colors, and I never did figure out why he wanted those on there because it didn't fit the idea. It didn't seem to me. But
so would have all of these had the same palette? Would you have been using?
Oh yeah,
the same
we
colors?
all did what we were told. Sort of what we saw happening. Oh yeah, Brackman wants a 19. I don't think he had an assistant or anything, so I think we all just picked it up from each other or something, and he approved it. Whatever, we all did the same thing.
What's interesting is that
pretty costly for a student.
How many colors did Gammell have on his palette? I don't want to get into Gammell.
Could have been a dozen.
Could have been a dozen.
Bigger number.
How many do you have now?
5.
It's like 7. Oh, 5.
5.
Well, 5 in black.
5 plus
black and white.
Yeah.
We can revisit this later, but it's interesting that if you compare these paintings to the work later, Gammell, and then especially the work you do now, you're using fewer colors on your palette.
Right.
Maybe by half or less, a third.
Yeah, a third.
But your paintings are actually more colorful now than they are here.
It's all how you use it.
Yeah.
That's a nice point. Thank you for making that one for me.
So can you give us an idea of, and I keep going back to this because I really want to know what skills you felt you had at the time. Was there anything you were happy about this painting? Happy about it when you finished it at the time? And can you just briefly tell us what did you feel at the time these paintings were accomplishing in your journey?
I should back you up because I felt I had no skills at all, and I was in a Hale class, which I mentioned to my viewers before.
Right.
And he walked up to one of my paintings and says, "Oh, I see you've had a long history of drawing." I had no competence, no history, nothing. So I don't know what he was talking about. And so someone can use a word like talent or something like that. Who knows what it was?
You had a history.
I think it was really meaning I'd drawn a lot. And I knew what I was doing. That sort of stuff was implicit, however he said that. I'm not quoting him exactly. And I just remember scoffing, thinking, well, why am I here? If you're going to come in and praise me, why would I be in this space? And he had nothing to offer from the point of view of how to draw. It was an anatomy class, and he, in a sense, he shouldn't have, except that there was only one person in that class, and he did have an assistant, and his person in there was a guy who was showing you how to do construction drawing. As I say, hack.
And it was all about the textbook knowledge about the figure?
Well, no, it was just hacking at the shapes. It was just, it's almost like if you were if you were a sculptor and you wanted to hack out the rough, and then sort of. But the point is, nobody was ever showing you how to get from the rough. And of course, you get 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute on a drawing. If you're having a really good day, you get 25 minutes.
Yeah. And
you can't do a thing. In fact, when I got to Gammell and I was actually studying a figure and
we
were painting.
Don't spoil it. We're going to get to Gammell.
Well, you can hold that for later, but there you are. But that's a big, big, big difference,
Yes.
About the
I do want to get
about
to
the number
that.
of hours versus the number of seconds you have to make a picture.
Yes.
And the whole discussion was about gesture.
So can we revisit that for a moment? I don't want to spoil the Gammell piece, because that's actually one of the the most fascinating things about the transition to Gammell from Art Students League. But the pace of a painting, I think that relates to what you're saying in terms of bringing it around and when you do that. How many hours does this painting represent, and what was setting up a painting? When you were at the Art Students League and began one of these, what did you do? What were you thinking about? How did you set it up? And because I want to contrast it with how Gammell did it.
Yeah. Well, the word pace, by the way, doesn't mean a lot to me, so you might want to work on that one a little bit. There's a different way of
How about
saying
tempo?
That. Well,
progression.
The progression is a better word. If you mean that when you say that.
I mean how the progression relates to time. So,
how much time did you put in doing this and then that and then this, or is it that plus the order?
It's how the order relates to the timeline.
How much time was put into it? Yeah. So in the Brackman world, you would throw a few lines and then pull out color. And so you're seeing pretty much that there, that very rough, that very thin line there, and a few places like that, just enough to sort of throw the. Now in Brackman's case, he kept, you can see it in his books. He kept using that hack line, which I've never understood. I mean, I blame the Bard method on using, the conversation, which you do see it in Jerome, some of his drawings. It looks very angular, like he never gets out of it. But he's got a way better training overall.
Do you want to show some of your sketches that you were?
I could do that, if you'd like,
Just the examples of when you use the word hack several times so far.
Yeah.
It's just to articulate what that means.
Yeah. Well, I should probably find you. And I'm hoping my camera guys can get us a little bit of a close-up. Let me just, no, that's not a good one.
You had folded this one too.
Yeah, I folded that one, but you're really talking about the hack. That's not the hack.
Well, yeah.
So here, I'm going to show you this one, and you'll see in it, this. I tried to find my very oldest catalog, notebooks, and I couldn't. And there was two of them just full, wall to wall. And this is me advanced for that phase. So I'm past this thing about hack. I'm trying to draw what I see. And that's just instinctive. That's just not being satisfied with 10. You got 10 minutes? I'm not going to be hacking. I'm going to draw a line. I don't have enough time to do anything else. Yeah. And gesture didn't mean much to me if it was just a bloody mess. I didn't care about gesture if it was a bloody mess. I wanted it to be, and that all was all more of the conversation. So if I can show this, you can see that these things don't have any linear character to them. They have a bunch of gash lines, some angle lines for the eyes, some other things. There was no conversation about top and bottom of head or figure or anything like that. It was nothing that you would recognize, that you would have seen from me.
So it's sort of working from the inside out model of diagramming the thing from the inside out.
This one? It would go all over the place. Some people in doing this, and you see that in some of the videos of people painting today, will go right into the eyes in minutes. They get sort of a rough thing at the head, and before they know it, they're finishing up eye areas.
Right.
Nothing. We didn't have any organization like that. It could go this way or that way, depending on the guy. And so I'll show you the one that's easier to look at because it's big. I hope you were able to get a focus on that, camera guys. If you can't, you ought to yell at me, I guess, Mr. Producer. But this one here, you can. By the way, this is a fun one in the sense that what Gammell said to me, I started drawing, and I had at some point I had a line coming his way and a hack line going that way, and he said, "I don't see an X out there on the corner of that foot in my drawing." He said, "I don't see an X." Now, that gives you a really clear idea of what the difference was. I mean, we're putting out something tentative, like training wheels, like a helper thing. And somehow or other, some of us believed that we were going to get to a fine drawing from that. And it just wasn't going to happen because they wouldn't give you enough time. So it was interesting how it was designed in a sense to make you end broken. You couldn't finish the job.
Yeah,
in a school like that. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that it was all like that, but that was the drawing class formally. And so there were other classes where, and I want to say Fargasso or somebody like that, there were classes where they would teach you a figure, rather an out-of-your-head figure. So the model would stand there and all the figures would look the same because you had learned this methodology for drawing that way. And I didn't go that way because I wanted to actually, somewhere I had an instinct again to study nature. Even picking Brackman, I saw a portrait that struck me as being full-fleshed. It was like it was really fully there. Significantly colored, but even the form was.
Do any of these come close to that? If that was a model at the time for what you were going for, any of these paintings get close to that?
If what was a model?
Well,
that full-fledged feeling.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that you could argue that might have been my sort of modus operandi in the very first place. I was trying. I would see nature, and I wanted to replay it. I wanted to imitate it. I wanted to get that quality. And it was, for some reason, I think that's with all of us without saying it, we know instinctively what it is. There's something that's doing there. Now, I say what it is. It's that it's doing this thing, and won't let go till we get that thing. But you don't have a word for any of it. You don't know what values do to make it. We don't know that angles matter or anything like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but no. In one sense, yes. I mean, but by the time you see that, like the evolution of that back of that head, you see that's a search for form. This one actually is probably at that point was miles ahead of anything I'd ever done in terms of realism. Meaning there's all that color, but look at the drawing. I'm bringing very particular drawing to places as they show. And oddly enough, I had an instinct to do that too. So, you know what I mean? And
to be visual about it.
To paint what I see and not try to paint things that are hard to see as much as, although you can see you see the hacking around going on. Look at that hand there. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I would do. The stuff I do to prepare to put that head in there would be, it'd be kind of like non-visual as it could be,
Yeah, I found
black
that to
lines
be
all through the
that's something that a lot of people do, and some people, to be honest, do it quite well in the sense that when they're done, you'd never guess
that it's under there.
But I have often wondered, what's the point to put all these marks underneath,
you need to,
only then to just have to cover it over? And at the time, do you know what you were thinking in terms of? You must have had a logic. Like, why did you draw that? It looks like you almost diagrammed the sort of whatever shape that is, the point or spear and shape of the hand or some of these. Were you thinking, I've just got to get that silhouette or I've got to get that shape? I guess it's dividing shape from color.
It was always first color. It was always first color, and then it would be shape, But, but you can see, I mean, what I was saying about this, though, is you can see that I was actually wanting all that thing had. Right. And the beauty of this entire painting, it wasn't in him, it was right here.
Yeah.
You see the time I spent on it. I mean, like, it's silly. By the way, you can also see that I was being influenced by Vermeer at the time. There's a certain amount of that. Going back and forth in the museum, you pick your guys, you know what I mean, without almost unconsciously.
I'm glad you bring up Vermeer because I did want to ask for each part, who were you looking at beyond your teachers? So name your teachers, just to refresh your memories. You've got Hale, you've got Brackman, you've got Green.
Right.
Was there anyone else who was influential?
I spent a summer course with David Leffel, and then I would listen to lectures by his teacher, whoever that guy was. He would do demonstrations and lectures, and it was nice the way they would just break it out and let anybody come into those spaces and watch it. It wasn't just their students. So, I mean, these studios, by the way, were full of like 40 people in a room, a small room. It was really difficult.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because that changed when you got to Gammell, I think, in terms of how many people. But so, did you have enough space between yourself and the model? Were you having to really just? Were you stacked in there? It sounds like you were. So you're
just stacked in, And there'd be a bunch of people who needed to sit, so they would pile all their chairs right around the model. And so you'd be lucky to find a place. Ideally, you try to find a place where somebody you know doesn't come in as often, where they aren't going to be there all the days. You try to find angles that are good, but it was that way, And then you would find that if the monitor set the model up. And if the monitor, so many monitors in those days would set up the model, and then they would take the first spot, which would be that spot.
Ooh, aren't they supposed
and
to
good
take
luck
the
with the
last
rest
spot?
of you.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I did. That was my model. I just said that's not okay. I just felt bad about it. So when it was my turn to do it, when I actually that was the model, the monitor for the green class, I just said I'm gonna make this so good that it doesn't matter what spot they pick. I'm gonna still have a good spot.
A great spot. Yeah.
And it never didn't work out.
I think that's something we tried to do in the studio.
Yeah, we tried to do that in the studio because I learned that.
We always hoped you didn't walk in before we started painting, because you'd walk in and say, "You're painting that?" And you'd rearrange the whole thing. And it'll be another 2 days before we could start painting. So,
tell all, yeah.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is the care in the setup and how much time is spent posing the figure, lighting the figure,
Right,
background, and when you're in a group setting,
Yeah.
you're trying to make a scenario that everyone painting out there would actually want to paint and learn something from.
Yeah.
Is challenging. So that world was crowded. There wasn't a whole lot of care in the positioning of the model because the moderators were setting up
It
for
was
maybe
up and
2 or
down.
3 good
Yeah,
spots.
yeah, yeah.
Is there a painting? Got 2 more questions on this
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
and then you add anything you want. I want to know if there's a painting here that you see as being exemplary of where you were at this point in time.
But my process was totally evolutionary. When I was doing Brackman, I'd do this little line thing and then blotch in all these little things. And it looked very amateurish, even for that. And then what happened was I began to see better. For example, I began to see that the walls aren't blotched; they're actually flat. They're smooth. Now, how do you do smooth? How do you do smooth broken color?
You don't use a sable brush?
Not hardly, So this is hugely advanced right here, where I'm getting all this color quality, and yet I'm not having broken color. But you can see the dilemma back here, where you can see the chunk stuff all over the joint. And
her feet look very familiar to me. They look very similar to what's happening in the farthest painting.
yes,
And in terms of the color note searching, it looks very similar to what happens in the studio now and happens in some of your starts. There's just this free feeling around looking for the
that was
color
very weird to me
relationships.
to see that, actually. When I look at this stuff, I realize that's done by one guy. You know, your own evolution
you're
has
him.
its own. This river ain't going down any other streams, any other ravines. This is the one.
And I'm sure there are other passages that you look at it, and I know I've talked a lot about Glenn Gould with you, but he has that great interview about his 2 recordings of the Goldberg Variations,
Yes,
and
yes.
he says that when he listens to himself, recordings of himself playing it, however many years earlier, I think it was 20 or 30 years earlier, that he doesn't know who that person is.
Yeah.
He doesn't recognize the pianist.
Yeah.
And so there are those moments, and then there are moments like you said just now, where you look at the paint and you think, "Gosh, I'm that same guy."
Yeah, you can see there's an inclination of the soul, and you don't know precisely what it is or why. An earlier comment you made, and I'll just make a brief one out of this, but the sculpture was because I had my entire history of looking at pictures, Encyclopedia Britannica. I think it was book number 23, volume number 23, and that was the paint. It was the what was it? Was it paintings? I forget what it was. What the caption? What the group of things was, but Michelangelo was my favorite person in that entire book, and you can see, and that's probably where I started feeling it, this yearning in the muscle.
He didn't really want to be a painter, did he? So
No, right, it's true, actually.
Well, that's a great. I'm glad you bring this up. You can speak more about that, but
Yeah.
weave it in or fold it into beyond the teachers you had at the Art Students League. Who were you looking at? What artists sparked something in you? Your imagination, your ambitions. Who were you looking at for instruction through art history at that time, or even contemporary painters, but not instructors?
Well, we were able to see quite a number of works by a former teacher at the Art Students League, which is William R. Chase, and I was always. He said, I suppose when I'm dead, they'll just remember me for my still life. Well, yeah. Not entirely, but I mean, it's almost that good, because those things were the ones that whenever I'd see them, I would be stunned, And then I would be looking at the rest of his work, and I would say, oh, that looks like a Whistler. Oh, that looks like a Sargent. Oh, that looks like, But Whistler, but Chase, when he was Chase, so we would see that, and that would be a model. I didn't know what to do with it, and I had actually no interest in being Sargent-like. I had no interest in this painterly thing that looked like it was more about the artist than about and about bravura and all those show-off things. Nothing personal about George Sargent. The guy's a colossal painter, but just those things were clearly not there. I just thought that was a trap. I wanted to make sure I stayed clear of that, and I think that's where a number of people. I kept watching people like Tiepolo. 2 or 3 really beautiful Tiepolos down there at the Metropolitan Museum, just rotten with color and nice masses of paint. I mean, really, really impressive. But if you're being brought into the world through color, Tiepolo's a big guy. You didn't have any idea whether he was painting, how true it was, and it certainly wasn't impressionism. But the color was there, and the paint was good. His paint was nice and thick.
So it's
there were
fair to
guys
say
like
you've
that.
always been under the spell of color from the very beginning.
Well, from the beginning, for certainly if you said looking at Gilbert Stuart, there's no color there.
I guess you're right.
But
although there's a really remarkable unity to his
that's
color,
for sure. Yeah.
and it has a very powerful tonal relationship, I guess, to the colors around it.
Right.
I'm thinking of the flesh tone in that particular portrait you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's very specific. It's just not colorful.
Yeah,
and
but
its
when you're
choice.
looking at most of the body of this work, though, it does look like I'm not Stewart.
Right.
But
yet.
the fact is, my entry to painting. See, this is one thing you should hear is that I got to New York and I said, it doesn't look like anybody knows anything about sculpture. But it looks like a whole bunch of people know more about painting, or I could learn more from those guys. So I said, well, I'm going to be all kinds of painter anyway, and sculptor or whatever, having the big view of yourself, an oversized view of yourself. And so I just took what I had in hand. I just said, I'll paint then.
So make sure I understand this correctly. You came with more of a background in sculpture. You would have taken sculpture classes at the Art Students League.
I would have really organized around sculpture, yeah.
But you got there and you realized, or you assessed, that there weren't the teachers there to provide you with the training that was worthwhile. So you said, I'm going to go with the painting teachers.
I think they may have only had Jose de Kraft, and maybe there's another guy there whose work I really have always liked. But I couldn't get. So I took some time with Kraft, maybe a semester or so with de Kraft, and I couldn't make any headway with. I couldn't make any progress here. I'd made more progress at the Canal Street School, the studio school, with this guy down there. He made more sense and was straightforward. And I did several sculptures. I actually thought about bringing one in here. But I'm just saying, though, so when I switched over as a guy who really, really believed he knew nothing.
Right.
Or I might have had a little more, I wouldn't have ever believed I knew anything about sculpture either, but you don't do that when you're coming out of no training.
So if you knew nothing, and then let's transition to stage two after you flesh this out for us. But if you knew nothing, if you felt like you knew nothing in that first semester at the Art Students League, and you spent, how long were you there total?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
2.5 years. At the end of the 2.5 years, you decide you're going to pursue Gammell.
Oh, I was pursuing him well before that, yeah.
Okay, well before that. So if you knew nothing, you felt you knew nothing when you arrived at the Art Students League. When you left, did you feel like you knew anything?
Well, the two things that came out of that background, maybe I'll say three. One of them was out of Daniel Green, and may he rest in peace, but to give him credit, was this guy would set out all these colors and explain to you why. In other words, he had an organizational mind. He would talk about the values moving in middle tones and stuff like that and show you where they were. So the analytical thing, which is crucial actually to personal development.
Yeah.
I saw it for the first time, and I never saw it with anybody else.
Wow,
Now,
that is a gift, yeah.
Well, I would say that Gammell had more of that, but I wouldn't tell you he was better at it necessarily. This guy he had the mind for that. Brackman, not Brackman, but Gammell was a little bit, he just had a better training, so he had all that stuff. But I never thought of him. But the thing is, the two things were this to this and that to that.
So it was an organized color approach.
Right.
This to this and that to that.
Yeah.
So the
And
relation.
the organized color thing was later on. That was Brackman was before that. So yeah, but not a whole lot before.
Okay, all right.
And the other thing that was Brackman, and he said, and I've related to people here before, possibly to you, but there were a couple Chinese students who were, and if they're married or if they're just brother sister or whatever, but they didn't speak much to us. I think they don't know if they were language challenged or shy or something. I don't know, but they're a handsome couple. But they, at one point, Brackman walked over to a painting they had leaning against the wall, and he looked to everybody in the room and he said, "There's a light effect. Somebody's finally got a light effect."
Oh wow!
And
That was the first time you had ever
that was
heard
light.
that word.
Yeah. Well, he would talk about it, but he never pointed at it. And so from that point forward, see, you're not seeing a guy hitting color notes anymore. You're seeing a guy looking for the light. And if that isn't major for anybody's evolution, how can, nothing is. You know what I'm saying? So that's to really give the Art Students League its due.
So just to recap, make sure we understand the three. The first one was Daniel Green and the understanding of what colors can
I
do.
still would put that third, but yes.
Oh, you put that third. Okay, and it's not in order of importance, but just to make sure everyone's clear on those three things.
But in terms of the progress to me, it was this to this and that to that. It was light, and then it was this whole concept of organizing.
Organizing color.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
And the whole idea is that's what we do. We collate data.
Yeah.
And it's just that. There isn't anything else. And that's what the people who think they're painting legs and doing anatomy are they're costing themselves in terms of time and effectiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A side note on something I'm doing now, I've been teaching Zooming, and I've had to come up with material that would translate well in that medium. And I decided that so many problems were coming from a place of pre-seeing color in nature. It's just that people almost were handicapped by their own palettes. They didn't know what colors could do just on the palette. And so I took it upon myself to do some studying myself into color in a way that I actually hadn't ever done, in a more systematic way, a way that would seem dry, but making color charts and things like that. And I just did a value chart. It was the big moment for me of realizing, geez, there's a lot of helpfulness in just spending some time familiarizing yourself with what your colors do. Why would I even imagine that I could just take them and do stuff with them on a painting without understanding what they are?
Nothing about them, Well, actually, I got to give credit to a high school teacher I had who actually had us do the Munsell stuff and paint all these squares and all that sort of stuff. And I do give, as much as I talk about, I hear people talk about those things and they turn it into a science thing and it's all about this abstract, theoretical, blah, blah, blah stuff. But the beauty of Munsell is it's about what you can do with a paint in your hands.
Right.
And this guy did introduce it through watercolor and through tempera paints. That guy had a really true love of the beauty in traditional painting and wasn't playing any modernist type games, which were all coming around about that point. In the 50s, I was in the early 60s.
All right, good. So let's get to Gammell. But we've got those three things. Say them one more time. Make sure everyone knows.
Yeah. So it's this and that to that, the relationship.
This and that to that.
Light
Relational.
effects.
Light effects and color organization.
Yeah. And I could throw one more thing in there. And I'm not going to say which painter I studied with that made me do this, but one painter actually took on the look of a painter from ancient history. And as soon as I saw that, and I said, "Oh, you're just doing little X's," I said, "I'll never do that." So I could add a fourth thing to that. I said, there's something about that that's just so wrong.
Are you talking about like?
Well, like somebody who paints like Sargent.
Okay.
It wasn't Sargent. It was
Don't
somebody
mention
else.
any names. Yeah.
No, I don't want to because that would be in the wrong category for us.
We're trying to be generous.
And this person, by the way, does really beautiful work. So I'm not even slightly faulting him over time at all. And he really isn't that. He really isn't ultimately an imitator. And I say to students, if you don't have anything else, imitate somebody. At least it's a place to start.
Yeah.
If you can get your head around them, maybe you can get your head around more stuff.
Yeah.
But I knew right there on the spot that was like an embarrassment in terms of your own person.
Well, I think you were clarifying what you wanted out of painting. And you said,
yes, of course.
And you said, I don't want, that's not where I want to go.
Yeah.
So
I want to be myself, not somebody else. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll end part one and we'll move to part two and we'll start out with why you started pursuing Gammell in the first place. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. That sounds really good.
All right.
Well, there you are. And thank you very much. Please share, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you in the next one.
Perfect.